Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Joseph Kuzma, and this is my video blog. Today we're going to be taking a closer look at the emerging transhuman possibility of generating consciousness without a body. So stay tuned as we take another journey to the limits of the mind. Think for a moment about the notions of personal identity, selfhood, consciousness, and memory. How exactly are they generated within the brain? And if we could fully understand the neurological processes that generate these phenomena, might we be able to someday replicate them in non-biological substrates, such as computer circuits, or even in networks based in the cloud? Would it be possible, in other words, to conceive of mental states, conscious thoughts, forms of human intelligence someday existing independently of human bodies? Might the uploading and downloading of personality traits, memories, emotions, and perhaps even entire minds someday be possible? Well, it depends, of course, upon what you believe about the nature of personal identity. For philosophers, the question of personal identity is basically this. We all have a sense of self. We all have a sense that we exist and that we are conscious. But what exactly is this self? Is it just a series of brain processes, of neurons firing, of neurological states involving axons, dendrites, synapses, neurotransmitters, and the like? If so, then our feeling of selfhood and personal identity might just be momentary effects of neurochemical reactions in the brain. This is one theory that many of you have probably heard before. In philosophy, it is sometimes called materialism or physicalism. Another theory, though, is that the self, the you, is actually more like a spirit or a soul that lives inside the body. In this theory, the person or self is a core entity inside our body that controls everything we say and think and do. This view is sometimes called ego theory. It's the idea that the self is a person's fundamental nature or essence. It is basically a kind of soul that exists inside our body, but lives on even after the body dies. So when you feel like you are a person, a self, an agent, it is this spirit, soul, or ego that you feel. Of course, this is a view held by many people. It has many forms, both religious and spiritual, and perhaps some non-spiritual forms as well. But there are huge problems with this theory. If you've ever studied Descartes, then you've probably encountered something called the mind-body problem. It's a philosophical paradox that emerges with any belief in the soul or spirit. Basically, it asks the question, where does the soul or the spirit meet the body? Where do the spiritual and the physical planes interact? How do they interact? And why is there no empirical evidence of such an interaction? In the mid-1600s, shortly after Descartes, the philosopher John Locke famously proposed a different theory of personal identity. Locke suggested that you essentially are your memories and your ability to reflect upon yourself, and more generally, your overall psychological configuration. This is sometimes today referred to as psychological continuity theory. It basically means that you are you so long as you can follow a thread of memory from your past into the present. When that thread of memory dissipates, you dissipate. David Hume, another philosopher following Locke, took a more radical position on personal identity. He argued that our belief that we have a self or are a self is actually nothing but a perceptual illusion. Sure, we experience a rapid flux of perceptions and sensations, Hume says, but there's nothing like a fixed, real self holding these perceptions together. There is no underlying self behind the passing flow of sensations. Selfhood is an illusion. You might find similar ideas, though expressed differently, in some Asian philosophies such as Buddhism. So in short, there are still to this day many different views about what a self is and how the feeling of personhood or personal identity is generated. And transhumanists, as you might imagine, are often engaged in these ongoing debates. One of the reasons why transhumanists are so interested in these questions is because a major area of research for transhumanists is the possibility of developing forms of artificial intelligence that can completely emulate the functioning of the human brain. If scientists could construct a network that operates in exactly the same way as the neural circuitry of the human brain, would that artificial network suddenly become capable of generating thought or generating human-like experience, or even human-like intelligence? And at what point would such a machine become a self? At what point would a machine become a person? And if this point were ever reached, would that machine, that network, or that computer then become deserving of certain human-like rights? Transhumanists, such as the writer Ben Goertzel, argue that as we learn more and more about the neurological intricacies of the human brain, and as our computers, networks, and artificial intelligence systems become better, we may soon reach a point where the two can merge together to create powerful new hybrids of brain and machine. One possibility that Goertzel discusses involves something called the global brain. The idea behind the global brain is that a higher order form of collective consciousness or collective intelligence might someday be generated by using each individual human mind as something akin to a neuron, just as neurons choose to fire or not fire as part of the overall self-coordinated activity of the human brain. So would each human being act and react as part of the overall self-coordinated activity of the global brain. All of us, linked together by technology, would then generate a higher level consciousness that would be incomprehensible to any individual part of the global brain. Of course, this is still just a possibility, one of many possible transhuman futures. It is based, however, on a well-known theory of mind that many transhumanists have adopted, known as functionalism. Functionalism basically says that mental activity, consciousness, and perhaps even phenomena like self-consciousness or awareness are nothing other than the emergent properties of any sufficiently complex system. The system doesn't have to be biological or even organic. It can be made of anything at all. Functionalism says, basically, that in order to generate consciousness or intelligence, or any form of thought for that matter, you don't need a brain. You just need something that functions like a brain. You need something with the type of feedback loops, circuits, rules, relations, and parts that are contained in a brain. But it doesn't have to be a real organic brain. It could be a cloud network. It could be a CPU. It could be a robot, or perhaps even the universe as a whole. As long as you have a system of any kind that is every bit as complex as the brain, you can generate a type of consciousness or intelligence that is every bit as complex as human consciousness or intelligence. This, in short, is the basic idea behind functionalism, and it leads to some pretty amazing takeaways. If consciousness and intelligence are simply emergent properties of any sufficiently complex system, then what if we were able to generate a network or a circuit or a system even more complex than that of the human brain? Could we then generate an intelligence far greater than human intelligence? That's the dream of many transhumanists. The question, however, which I would urge you to reflect upon, is whether there are any aspects of human experience or human consciousness that could not be replicated without a body. What aspects of your consciousness, for example, would computer scientists have the hardest time replicating or reconstituting in a cloud network? It's a fascinating series of questions to ponder as we move onward in this transhuman age. Well, that's it for this edition of the video blog. I hope you all enjoyed learning about the question of personal identity and the problem of consciousness here in the age of transhumanism. As always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and until next time, keep on philosophizing.